again?
Anna 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠𝑧. Just a moment.
It's okay, you can spell it.
Anna 𝑇𝑠𝑢𝑡𝑦.
Suki?
Just
Yeah. Oh, TY, okay.
yeah.
President of the,
Polish Heritage Institute Cassidy.
let me write it down. Polish? No, let me just write it down.
Heritage Institute Cassidy, Canon. Yeah. I prepared this one. Okay.
Thank you. I will walk with you.
Chelsea Chris and gift and you and gift for him.
Is that? Oh yeah. You want to come up and give it to him? Or you want? Yes. Oh, nice. That's beautiful.
Inside.
Bye.
So, I have a little bag for donations.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I'm going to mention that.
Okay.
Yeah. If everyone could.
No problem when gift when
It doesn't
talking,
matter when?
Talking. No, you. That's no problem when I speak Polish language and when you are to English language. The same wish. There's two languages, Polish and English.
Okay, sure, yeah. Hello.
Switch here.
Okay. I just want to tell people to come.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello. If I could please ask everybody to come and have a seat, that would be wonderful. Okay. Good evening and welcome to Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College's 6th annual Dr. Keith Cassidy Lecture on this special feast day, the Solemnity of the Annunciation. At this time, I would like to invite Father Michał up to say an opening prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Saint Hedwig, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you very much, Father Michał. My name is Dr. Christine Schinken, and I am the president of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College. I extend warm greetings to all of you. It's certainly wonderful to see so many people here. I would like to recognize, of course, Father Michał Pająk, OMI, as well as Father Daniel from St. Mary's in Wilno, I think is here as well. Thank you, Father, for being with us. I'm not sure if there are any other priests here tonight. Father Brian, perhaps? Father Brian Christie of Madonna House, are you here? Or any other priests or sisters? And then we also have, I'd like to recognize in a special way, Miss Natalia Kubik. I hope I've said that correctly, if you'd like to stand. She is from the Polish Embassy, and her title is Consul of the Republic of Poland, Head Consular and Polish Diaspora Section. Please welcome Miss Natalia Kubik. It's a great honor to have a representative of the Polish Embassy with us. We also want to recognize in a special way Miss Anna Psuti, President of the Polish Heritage Institute, Kashubi, Canada. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. So I'm going to lead up to, of course, recognizing a couple of very special people. But on the way there, I would just like to make sure that everybody here knows what Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College is. Since we're hosting the event, we can take a moment to explain who we are. Our mission is to provide an excellent liberal arts education that forms the whole person in a faithfully Catholic context. And we offer a 3-year bachelor's degree, as well as several 4-year Bachelor of Arts degrees with majors in history, literature, and classical and early Christian studies, as well as 1- and 2-year certificates, the credits of which are accepted at many other universities, most other universities, colleges. So students go on to finish degrees in psychology, business. I see many alumni here, and they've all gone on to do wonderful things. I won't recognize you all because we'll be here all night. But since I may not get the chance to say this later in the evening, I'd just like to mention that we have a display table at the back. Mrs. Teresa Buonafede is waving at us at the back here. There's a banner there. You can see there's a table, and you can sign up to receive our newsletter. It's free. And there is also a donation basket, so if you'd like to contribute to our mission, please feel free to do that. We are private, we're not government funded, so we rely on donations of all sizes. Also, if you know of any young people who might benefit from coming here as a student, please encourage them. It's a wonderful place. Students get a great formation, and they have a lot of fun as well. And they meet friends for life. They often, find their path in life, their vocation. So it's a wonderful place. And a new feature this year, we have a summer camp. Actually, 2 week-long summer camps, 2 options in July. So you can find out more about all of that at the table at the back. So, having said all of that, the Dr. Keith Cassidy Lecture Series was launched in 2019 in order to honor the legacy of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College's past president, Dr. Keith Cassidy. This series consists of lectures presented by noted intellectuals on topics of significance to the academic community. Tonight, we are especially blessed to have Dr. Cassidy himself in our midst, the man, the myth, the legend. Could you please rise? We are also delighted to welcome his daughter, Maureen Cardinal, and her newborn son, Declan. And so now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce our honored speaker. Mr. Christopher Adam Zakrzewski is a literary translator, a teacher, a master teacher, and a scholar. He was raised in the United Kingdom and in Ontario. He undertook doctoral studies in Russian and Polish literature at the University of British Columbia. Mr. Zakrzewski served as a professor of languages and literature at Our Lady Seat of Wisdom for many years. He's a much beloved professor. Many here in the audience are nodding in fond appreciation of Mr. Zakrzewski's lively and very human education, teaching style. He is, of course, also the translator of various works, including preeminently 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠, a monumental work of Polish literature about which we will, of course, learn more tonight. Now retired, Chris Zakrzewski and his wife, Wendy, live in the village of Wilno, Ontario. They have 5 children and 9 grandchildren. Please welcome Mr. Christopher Zakrzewski.
Well, good evening. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'd like to start with the 2 invocations that from 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠. There are 2, one short one slightly longer one. The second one I've fashioned into a prayer, since this is the feast of Our Lady of the Annunciation, and this being the college, Seat of Wisdom, Our Lady Seat of Wisdom College, it would be appropriate to say this little prayer. But first, I'll just start with the first 4 lines of 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠, and I invite our Polish guests, who no doubt will know much more than 4 lines of this poem by heart, but to join me. So I'm going to start. Litwo, ojczyzno moja, Ty jesteś jak zdrowie. Ile Cię trzeba cenić, ten tylko się dowie, kto Cię stracił. Dziś piękność Twą w całej ozdobie widzę i opisuję, bo tęsknię po Tobie. I'll leave that untranslated, but the second invocation I've translated. O blessed Maid, who safeguard the bright mount of Częstochowa, thou who shinest thy golden beams from Wilno's Ostra gate, Our Lady of Ostrobram, protectress of Nowogródek and her pious citizens. In my boyhood once, thou healed me by wondrous sign. My sobbing mother no sooner commended me to thy care than I raised my lifeless eyelids and soon found myself able to walk unaided to thy holy shrine, where I offered my thanks to God. So too, by a sign, shalt thou restore us to the bosom of our land. Now, the Polish word for land, in this case, is ojczyzna, a very important word in the poem, 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠. Most directly, it's translated as fatherland, but that has too Teutonic a sound. The best translation of ojczyzna is patria, the Latin word patria. And as you know from Thomas Aquinas, his hymn, Qui vitam sine termino nobis donet in patria. This is the patria that we can think of here. All right, that was just a little introduction. And now I'd like to make a few some general introductory comments before I get into the actual lecture. So let me just, the light is, I could do with a little light here, but anyway, I think I can manage. Rendering 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠 into English comes with a unique set of obstacles. In the case of 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠, these begin with the very title of the work, 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠. Well, pan's no problem. Pan is equivalent to the Spanish don, or the French monsieur, or the German Herr. It means, and as in Spanish, as in French, and in German, you can use that style along with the first name, the given name. And that gives you that expresses, suggests a genteel informality that stops short of the familiarity of using a single name, a given name. So it's like Monsieur Christophe and so on. Thank you. Oh, is that for me? Good. Thank you. That would be easier. Thank you very much. So pan is no problem. Don. Think of Don Juan, Don Pedro. So the English title, then obviously it's hard to render. Then there's the name Tadeusz. Okay, Tadeusz is a very common Christian name in Poland even today. Apart from the eponymous hero, 4 Tadeuses are introduced in the very first pages of the poem. How is the translator to deal with this cultural peculiarity? Englishing the name would introduce an element of strangeness that does not exist in Polish. Preserve the original name, despite the apparently awkward spelling and pronunciation. I decided that little was to be gained and more lost by Englishing the title. This in the hope, vain hope perhaps, that when the Polish classic becomes still better known, the Anglosphere will find a way of absorbing the original title into common parlance, much as it has done with Cervantes' novel Don Quixote. Sorry. Oh. Is this blinding you? Yeah, sorry. Closer to... You want me to be closer? Okay, all right. There, I can hear myself better now. Another obstacle requiring my serious consideration was finding the right instrument with which to pitch to the modern English-speaking consumer this vast piece of Polish real estate, which was the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the binational state whose borders in its heyday extended from the Baltic to the Black Sea and ceased to exist in 1795, 3 years before the birth of the poet, of Pan Tadeusz, with the third partition of Poland. The poet, I haven't named him yet. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not Mickiewicz, it's not Mickiewicz, it's not Mickiewicz, it's Mickiewicz, okay? Mickiewicz, I gave that away. That was my late lamented mother-in-law. She insisted for some reason to call him Mickiewicz. No matter how many times I corrected her. Anyway, God bless her heart. She died at the age of 103, just last year. Yeah. So, as I say, right. Now, before undertaking my present translation, I considered every option and toyed with numerous metric possibilities, including the iambic pentameter line, the hexameter, a looser line with 6 strong stresses and an indeterminate number of unstressed ones, and blank verse. I quickly discarded the option of rhymed metric verse, given the comparative paucity of pure rhymes in an analytic language like English. Polish, being a synthetic, inflected language, is much richer in rhymes and better able to sustain a poem running to some 12,000 lines. In the end, I opted for the medium of prose. And this largely for another oft unspoken reason, the elephant in the room, if you like, the perennial irritant, and that involves me directly with my surname, the perennial irritant of Polish personal and place names. This peculiarity of the Polish language is all the more to be reckoned with, given the fact that Pan Tadeusz is fundamentally an epic poem. It shares epic poetry's fondness for genealogies and catalogues of personal and place names. Let me just give you an example. It's not an extreme example. Here, in the book 1, po polsku. Tak przekradł się Gorecki, Poc i Obuchowicz, Piotrowski, Obolewski, Różycki, Janowicz, Mierzejewscy, Brochocki, Bernatowicze, Kupś, Giedymin i inni, których nie policzę. Okay, well, find me the wordsmith, the English wordsmith who could felicitously and seamlessly integrate those lines into the surrounding accompanying narrative, okay? Not easy. In fact, and into rhyme as well. So you see the problem. So my point is that Pan Tadeusz is rife with such passages which, converted into English metrical form, cannot avoid stirring a veritable hornet's nest of dissonances. I'm talking about from the point of view of the English ear, right? Metric verse, be it rhymed, near rhymed, or blank, cries, qua poetry, to be read aloud, and can only draw further untoward attention to the oral, visual dissonances of the myriad foreign names that obtrude themselves upon any translation of the Polish masterpiece. The fact of the poem being written in a language with a phonology so foreign to that of English was thus another significant factor in my decision to turn to prose rather than verse. The medium of prose, and I'll be repeating this later, the medium of prose, not normally read aloud, is better able to absorb passages loaded with polysyllabic names following strange orthographic rules, with less distraction afforded to the non-native reader. Okay, so having chosen the medium of prose, I was faced with the final, all-consuming challenge, namely telling a good story, which Pan Tadeusz eminently is, and there, as we all know, the art is all in the telling. Okay, so that was my little introduction. Now, I'm going to begin the actual lecture, which will take about 15, maybe 14 minutes or so, maybe less. And the title of the lecture is Adam Mickiewicz's Pan Tadeusz, the Great Polish Epic and the Western Canon. And I have two epigraphs that come with this lecture. The first one is by Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, or Don Quixote, as is also pronounced in English. See, the English language can find ways of absorbing foreign names. They haven't found it with Pan Tadeusz yet, but I'm hoping they will. So the epigraph goes, epics may be written in prose as well as in verse. So that's convenient. And the second one is, and I think this is a profound one, it's from Dostoevsky, his line, beauty will save the world. Okay. So I launch into the lecture. Pan Tadeusz has yet to be freed from its fiercely tight national orbit and claim its rightful place among the higher orbiting luminaries of the Western canon. Wider recognition of the Polish masterpiece has always been hampered by a certain quixotic eccentricity that sets the great poem apart from the main body of European classics. Perhaps no other classic, not even Dante's Divine Comedy, nor even Pushkin's own elusive novel in verse, Eugene Onegin, finds itself more captive to the tongue in which it was written, bedeviling all attempts at translation, without which, needless to say, no work of literature can reach a universal audience. Now, I just want to emphasize at this point that, excuse me, got it somewhere here. Yeah, notice I'm not making the case for Tadeusz's inclusion among the great works of Western civilization. It is that de facto, by the very fact that it exists. What I am saying is that Tadeusz is of such high artistic merit that there is no defensible reason why, for example, Dante's Divine Comedy and John Milton's Paradise Lost should be considered part of the Western canon and not, at least as far as yet, Mickiewicz's Polish masterpiece. Now, Tadeusz baffles categorization as a literary genre. It is neither typically an epic poem, nor a mock heroic in the 18th century tradition, nor a pastoral idyll, nor a romantic narrative poem, nor a realist novel in verse, nor yet a fairy tale. It is all these things and much more. The integration of such disparate generic elements in an artistically sound whole is primarily a matter of striking the right style, and Mickiewicz, above all, was a master of style. In Tadeusz, Mickiewicz achieved in traditional verse what in our current age is arguably no longer achievable by even the great poets. This, at least, was the view of the Polish poet Czesław Miłosz. Mickiewicz, he writes, knew how to use conventional phrasing and without straying beyond its limits, transform it into something completely new. That is not easy. Many poets maintain their standards only at the price of being unconventional and drop into dullness as soon as they venture into traditional methods. Through a slight retouching of words, a genuine poet is able to invest a commonplace phrase with charm. But genuine poets are rare. And there are periods of history when such an operation is impossible because the use of a common style is then beyond the reach of even the great poets. Now, Donald Davie, one of the few discerning English poets to have tried his hand at fragments of Mickiewicz's verse, agreed with Miłosz. These observations, he writes, and the implication behind that Mickiewicz can today be an unusually fruitful model are as timely and as apposite in London as in Warsaw. The example of Mickiewicz can be of great help to the English poet of today who is consciously trying to learn his trade. For English poets of today must be engaged, just as their Polish contemporaries are. I could be using the past tense here, but I'll explain in a minute, in fighting their way back from the dryness, from surrealism and the poésie pure, and belated Victorianism, to a classical dryness and to the formula coined by T.S. Eliot and echoed by Mr. Miłosz, the perfection of a common language. Now, these words were written some closer to 7 decades ago in a relatively benign literary context. Yet, if anything, the intervening passage of time has only enhanced their relevance. One needn't be a close observer of contemporary hypermodernist trends to be able to conclude that we have by no means put behind us the period of history alluded to by Miłosz. Indeed, the heightened historical, thank you. Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay. Thank you.
I think there's a few calls for you. Yes, indeed, the heightened historical moment in which we find ourselves today compels even the most sanguine observer of culture to attach a darker significance to Miłosz's and Davies' words that these poets perhaps entertained, or at any rate intended. We find ourselves enmeshed in the neo-Gnostic age, when prevailing ideologically driven aesthetics and deconstructionist cultural forces conspire to propel not just poetic, but all manner of discourse headlong in the very opposite direction of a true common style or language, by which I mean a language adequate to the task of expressing authentic human experience within the frame of the natural law. Generic language imposed by edict, so-called politically correct newspeak, inclusive language, all of which violate the particularity and synecdicality of words, and in a deeper sense are exclusive to the core. These are egalitarian atrocities amounting to an Orwellian assault on the referentiality and clarity of ordinary words. What influence poetry can exert against the background of this powerful onslaught on the nature of language and thought is a crucial question today. The prevailing postmodern anti-culture, which denies the natural law and holds the meanings of words, logical discourse, and the very notion of objective truth in contempt, does not respond easily to refutation of error by wise example or reasoned argument. At the same time, as the mirror held up to that infinitely differentiating thing called nature, that's what I always used to say to my students, God loves difference. Oh, I could have used the French, vive la différence, right? And the devil likes standardism. He wants things to be the same. So at the same time as the mirror held up to that infinitely differentiating thing called nature, the true poetic imagination finds itself fundamentally at odds with the current of Procrustean thinking that prevails today. The egregious, in the etymological sense of standing out from the flock, the eccentric, the particular, as opposed to the generic, the strange, the mysterious, the things that constitute the very impulse of artistic creation are precisely the things that the post-Marxian strain of soft ideological thinking abhors and conspires to eliminate by the process of praxis and progressive marginalization. Not surprisingly then, genuine poetic art, the most effective means of countering the relentless and universal rape and truncation of language, finds itself increasingly marginalized, denied a significant audience, and consequently rendered impotent. Upon this drab, hypermodernist landscape, the art of Mickiewicz falls like something from a higher world. Mickiewicz's genius consists in his bringing to perfection a sublime, classical poetic style of utter simplicity. The hallmark of his poetic art is the stark purity of his language. With his Russian contemporary and friend, Alexander Pushkin, and here I'm revealing my Russophile leanings, though I prefer to see myself as a pan-Slav. With Pushkin, Mickiewicz shared that unique ability of packing powerful sentiment into the smallest compass. Многое в немногом, multum in parvo. We immediately recognize the same austere habit of mind, the same economy of expression and unerring sense of the native strength of the word. And yet here we have two distinct species of simplicity. If Pushkin's art achieves an effect of Mozartian lightness and centrifugal amplitude. Nikolai Gogol referred to the effect as an abyss of space. Mickiewicz's achieves the very opposite effect, a taut vigor and a centripetal gravitas of the kind we find not in Mozart, but in Beethoven and Tolstoy. Small wonder, then, that discerning modern poets, in their preoccupation with stylistics, have found in the poetic art of Mickiewicz material as profitable as that of Dante in their search for a common poetic idiom. To its credit, the late modern era with its preoccupation with style and stylistics, has done much to shed light on the indivisibility of the poetic utterance. Like Pushkin's, though compassed by altogether different means, Mickiewicz's simplicity is great simplicity because it blurs the conventional distinction between the form and content of a poem. It constitutes an ideal dynamic fusion, a reciprocal straining of elements in which the form becomes the content and the content the form. While eminently capable of sublime poetical flights, in which, as Davy puts it, the prosaic statement is only a shaft of light through the foliage of metaphor, and in this sense the Polish poet is much more like Shakespeare than Pushkin, Mickiewicz is equally capable of achieving effects that close the gap between poetry and prose in an incomparable generic synthesis. He is indeed the poet of transformation, as the Polish scholar Wiktor Weintraub calls him, where the scope of the term encompasses not only the power of his protean imagination, but also the very structures by which that imagination is expressed. All this contributes to the difficulty of classifying and fully appreciating his masterpiece, Tadeusz. With Mickiewicz, as Marshall McLuhan would have put it, the style is the whole show. The style is the poem. Absent the subsuming dimension of its style, or heterostylism, to use the term coined by the Russian critic Sergei Bocharov in his discussion of Pushkin's Eugene Onegin, the reader of Tadeusz is left with little more than a patriotic cri de coeur piggybacked on a sentimental tale of a pair of star-crossed lovers. The whole inflorescence, to use the poet's extended simile of the urchin blowing on the dandelion, you'll know that, who know that famous little Homeric simile that Mickiewicz uses. The whole inflorescence flies away like down on the wind, leaving behind in the hand of the fastidious observer a naked pedestal of grayish-green hue. Thus, to expect from Tadeusz a realism of the kind found in a conventional novel, for example, is to completely misapprehend the work and apt to disappoint the modern reader. If nothing else, a fresh look at the art of Mickiewicz may give us occasion to pause and take stock of how far we have strayed from the notion and the reality of a genuine common language. My overriding aim, then, has been to produce, within the limits, in my translation, within the limits and limitations of standard English prose, a close and readily readable translation of this largely unknown masterpiece of European Romantic literature. In this, I am repeating what George R. Noyes sought to achieve in his almost century-old prose version of the poem. That translation was never intended to be anything more than a bare, literal rendering of the original, which might serve as a springboard for future, more creative experiments. My hope is that a new, more readable prose rendering will spur more translators to undertake renderings of the Polish poem. Needless to say, Tadeusz ought, nay, demands to be translated into verse. This despite the formidable obstacle posed by the poems having been written in a language with a phonology so foreign to that of English, or any other West European language for that matter. The fact that Tadeusz is fundamentally, and I've said this already, is fundamentally an epic poem, means that it shares epic poetry's characteristic fondness for genealogies and catalogues of personal place names. The enterprising translator must therefore be prepared to contend with passages that, converted into English metrical form, cannot avoid stirring a veritable hornet's nest of dissonances. And I've indicated metric verse begs to be read aloud. Can only draw further attention to the oral and visual dissonance of the myriad foreign words that occur in the poem. The medium of prose, as I said, which is normally read aloud, is better able to absorb passages loaded with polysyllabic names, following strange orthographic rules, with less distraction afforded to the non-native reader. It is, of course, too much to expect, I'm approaching the end, Mickiewicz's poetic art to attract translators in the Anglosphere to the extent that it has in Russia, for example, where translating the Polish poet became a kind of rite of passage. Listen to this: Pushkin, Kozlov, Vyazemsky, Fiat, Maikov, Balmont, Akhmatova, Khalasiewicz, Bunin, and Nabokov all either translated, studied, or expressed deep admiration for Mickiewicz. But Donald Davies' 60-odd-year-old observation that Mickiewicz can be an unusually fruitful model, as timely and as apposite at home and abroad, still applies, and the aspiring English poet, interested in perfecting his craft, could do worse than to try his hand at rendering at least significant portions of Tadeusz. If Dostoevsky's dictum that beauty will save the world holds true, then the poet still has a crucial role to play in the culture of our day. The degradation of cultural values and corruption of public morals, resulting ultimately in the tragic loss of national sovereignty, circumstances that gave rise to Mickiewicz's masterpiece, resonate ominously with the distemper of our time. Finding herself already partially dismembered and on the brink of total collapse, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth undertook sincere, alas, vain efforts towards national renewal. I wonder what something south of our border, things that's being tried. Anyway, I won't go there. Her commission, her commission of natural Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian state, her commission of national education, the world's first ministry of education created by her parliament and king in 1773, her constitution of May 3rd, Europe's first and the world's second modern written national constitution, adopted in 1791, only 3 years after that of the United States, and the consequent erasing of a sovereign state from the political map of Europe are all matters of historical record. And my question is, can Western civilization yet muster the will and resolve to reach back into its authentic patrimony, recognize in it its salvific beauty, and achieve its own Tolkienian scouring of the Shire? Or will the poet's yearning for his forfeited country, like Dante's, for his beloved Florence, soon become the common lot of humanity? To this I've just added a little sort of addendum, which is worth reading. And then after maybe a drink of water, I'd like to read some extracts from the poem, from my translation. Anyway, what I want to say here is add that Professor George Weigel, Distinguished Senior Fellow and William E. Simon Chair in Catholic Studies, concedes that Tadeusz is a challenging text and well it might appear to the English-speaking world, unfamiliar as it tends to be with Polish history and culture. Yes, the sheer number of historical and cultural references contained in this epic poem, running to some 12,000 lines, requires plowing through a prodigious editorial apparatus. But in this, and I'm talking about translation, reading Tadeusz in translation is no more daunting than reading renderings of the Iliad, the Aeneid, or the Divine Comedy. All such works require and are regularly supplied with batteries of endnotes, explications, and glossaries. But as Dr. Andrzej Waszko observes in his introductory essay to my translation, the reader who perseveres with Pan Tadeusz will discover that the Polish world portrayed in it is not as foreign as it might appear at first glance. Despite its unique and poorly known history and culture, despite its traditional dress, which the Germans, the French, and the English did not wear, despite the traditional Polish dishes, whose taste and very names remain untranslatable, which I can vouch to, it is essentially the same world in which everyone in the West has always lived, and in which, may we hope, our grandchildren will continue to live. Thank you.
For that fascinating talk. I think we have time for questions. If you're willing, Mr. Zakrzewski?
Yes, by all means.
I was hoping, will you read us some before the questions? Will you be reading us some of the poems before the questions?
Yes, shortly. I'll just have a drink here. Right, so I'm going to read sections now. I can shorten. How long have I gone? No. I don't think, okay, 15 minutes.
We have time.
Lots of time? All right. I've chosen to read a section of the fourth book, which is kind of it's the showpiece of Pan Tadeusz. It's entitled Diplomacy and the Hunt. And it deals with the bear hunt and the Poles' fascination with hunting. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, you can see this if you live in Barry's Bay. Hunting season comes around, and I'm talking about Poles in the broad sense, which includes the other Western Slavs among us, the Kashubs. And I could comment on that further, but the city suddenly, the town suddenly is empty. The population disappears into the forests, forests very similar to the ones described by by Mickiewicz. And they're gone for even the high schools. The teachers come to class, but the students don't even. The women too. Okay, that's right. Hunting is a passion. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll use it. Okay, so I'm going to start reading book four. Now, I might just indicate some of the main characters that appear significantly in this portion of the chapter. Excuse me. Okay. There we go. List of main characters. Okay, so just so that you're not totally confused, Pan Tadeusz has an involved plot. Okay, so, and of course you're dealing with names, with Slavic names, and if you've read Russian novels, you know that if you're louder. Przepraszam. Okay, if you've read Russian novels, you know that that's a problem. You need to check all the list of characters all the time, unless you happen to be fluent in the language. So we have, okay, so Pan Tadeusz is the eponymous hero. He's a young man, and he's in conflict with the Count. And the Count is a distant relative of a family, of the Horeshko family, which, okay, he's an Anglophile with quixotic leanings, okay. So they will be involved in this reading. Another important character, two other comical characters, the notary and the assessor, owners of a pair of greyhounds, which I've named Peregrine and Scott in English. And then we have Jankel. Jankel is a Polish Jewish innkeeper, Polish patriot, a maestro of the first repute. Wonderful character. Okay, I think those are the main ones. That then, of course, the chief steward who organizes the hunt, and the warden. Yes, there are two characters, again, two comic characters, Gervasius and Protasius in Polish. I've anglicized them to Gervais and Proteus. And there were two saints, Roman saints of that, by that name. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to throw a lot of foreign, or it's not so much foreign, but strange, unknown names at you, but that'll give you the... You will have to do the same reading the Iliad, or the... Right? That's nothing special. You don't have to know who they are right away. You might well look up afterwards. Okay. Coevals of Lithuania's Grand Dukes. You trees of Białowieża, Świteś, Ponary, and Kuszelewo. Your shade once fell on the crowned heads of the dread lord Witynės, mighty Mindove, and Gedimin, when sprawled on a bearskin by a hunter's fire, he listened to the croonings of his sage Lizdejko. Gazing down from the Ponary heights, lulled to sleep by the sight of the Vilja and the brawl of the Vilenka, he dreamed of an iron wolf, then roused to the task at the clear behest of the gods, founded the city of Vilno, that broods in the forest like the wolf among the bison, bear, and wild boar. As Rome sprang from the she-wolf, so from Wilno sprang Kestut, Olgierd, and the entire Olgierd line, intrepid knights and hunters all, equally unswerving in the charge and the chase. And so our future stands revealed in the hunter's dream. Timber and iron, of these Lithuania shall always have need. You ancient woodlands. Now we're talking about the old forests, right, of Lithuania. And Mickiewicz truly does justice to describing these forests. But, you know, a stroll through our woods around Vilno here in Canada can be similarly moving. Oh, my native trees. No, sorry. You ancient woodlands, the last of them came hunting your game, last of our princes to sport Witol's Kalpak, last of Jagiello's line of blithe warriors, Lithuania's last monarch of the chase. Oh, my native trees, my old friends, if heaven permits that I should see you again. The poet is in exile in Paris. Shall I find you yet? Do you still live? You at whose feet I used to crawl as a babe. Does mighty Baubles live? Reamed out by the ages, his hollow chamber could comfortably seat a dozen guests around the table. Does Mendog's Grove still blossom by the parish church? And yonder in the Ukrainian borderlands, does the ancient linden still stand before the Holovinsky house on the banks of the Ros? 100 youths and 100 maids found ample room to dance beneath her spreading shade. Our monuments, how many of you toppled each year by the timber merchant and Muscovy's axe? Scarce a hunt remains for the woodland songster, or the bard who holds your bowers equally as dear. Did Jan's beloved linden not hang upon his every word? Did she not prompt him with rhymes by the score? And that prattling oak, no end to the marvels he croons in our Cossack poet's ear. And I, how much I stand in your debt, my native trees. What thoughts didn't I, a trifling hunter, pursue in your quiet solitudes, after fleeing my comrades' taunts over a quarry mist. Deep in the old forest, the hunt long out of mind, I'd sit me down on a small knoll. Around me glint patches of silver-bearded moss, shot through with the crimson of crushed bilberries. Yonder mantles the rolling heath, festooned with mountain cranberry as with chaplets of coral. Darkness embosoms me. A canopy of interlacing branches hangs low over my head like an overcast of dense green cloud. And high above that motionless vault, the wind soughs and moans, whistles, wails, and booms. A strange, heady din. You'd swear a boisterous sea hung suspended there. Below sprawls a conurbation of ruins. An overthrown oak towers up like a vast pile of building. On either side of it, lean, half-rotted trunks and bristling stumps resembling shattered columns and fragments of wall. Tall grasses hedge it round. Prying eyes, beware. Behind that palisade dwell the lords of the waste, the wild boar, the bear, the wolf. Half-gnawed bones of unwary guests bestrew the entranceway. Now and anon, a pair of antlers springs out of the undergrowth like two water jets. Away springs the stag, a tawny blur passing through the trees like a fugitive sunbeam. Silence returns below. A woodpecker taps lightly at a spruce, then flies off and vanishes from sight. Yet he goes on tapping like a concealed child beckoning to its seekers. A squirrel sits on its haunches, gnawing at a nut. His brush overhangs his brow like a hussar's helmet plume, yet nothing escapes those darting eyes. A stranger intrudes. Away flies our dancer of the woods. Like a levin flash, he leaps from tree to slip at last into a hidden cleft, like a wood sprite returning to his native tree. Silence again. A rowan tree stirs. A clustering branch draws back, and a face ruddier than a rowan berry pokes through the opening. A village maiden out foraging for fruit and nuts. Her rude birch bark basket brims with cranberries for the taking, fresh and red as her lips. At her side walks her swain. He reaches down a hazel spray while she grasps for the flashing cobs. Suddenly, horn blasts, hound music. A hunt draws near. Alarmed, the pair fly into the leafy thicket, melting from sight like woodland deities. Soplica is the surname of Pan Tadeusz Soplica. This uncle owns the manor, the judge. Soplica Manor was all astir. Yet neither the noise of the hounds, nor the nor the neighing of the horses, nor the creaking of the carts, nor yet the blare of the horns announcing the start of the hunt, roused Tadeusz from his slumbers. Sound as a marmot, he slept, still in the clothes he'd worn on dropping into bed that night. None of the youths thought to look for him in the house. All were about their affairs, anxious to be at their posts. Their sleeping companion passed entirely unnoticed. On he snored. Through a heart-shaped opening cut out of the wood window shutter, a fiery shaft of sunlight streamed into the darkness, falling full on the sleeping lad's brow. He would have dozed on, but even as he turned from the glare, an urgent tapping sound awoke him. Happy awakening. He felt blithe as a bird, and he breathed softly. He felt glad. He smiled, and in full memory of last night's assignation, he'd had a little tryst with a character. He blushed and he sighed, and his heart began to race. He glanced up at the window. Ye gods, shining in the sunlit aperture, enclosed within that heart, were two bright eyes, opened wide as one would expect of eyes peering into the darkness from the broad daylight. He saw a small hand raised fan-wise to the temple to shield the eyes from the glare. The rosy light made transparencies of the delicate fingers, suffusing them with a ruby hue. He made out a pair of curious lips, slightly parted, a gleaming row of little teeth like pearls in the coral, and cheeks that, even without the roseate hand shading them, mantled red as a rose all over. Tadeusz lay on his back by the window. Unseen in the darkness, he marveled at the apparition hovering directly above him, almost touching his face. Was he awake, he wondered, or simply imagining one of those radiant little faces that haunt the dreams of our innocent youth? The face peered down at him. Trembling with awe and delight, Tadeusz gazed hard upon it, and only then, to his indescribable chagrin, recognized the short, pale gold tresses wrapped in snow-white curl papers, the same silvery pod-like objects he'd seen flaming in the sun like a saintly glory. That was Zosia, his wife-to-be, or his bride-to-be, later on. He sat up with a jerk. The vision vanished, startled by the movement. In vain he waited for it to reappear. Presently, he heard 3 more taps and an urgent voice saying, "Sir, it's time to get up for the hunt. You've overslept yourself." Tadeusz sprang from his couch and dashed back both shutters with such violence that the hinges rattled and the leaves, flying open, crashed against the wall on either side. Landing on the ground outside, he looked about him in surprise and bewilderment. Not a soul in sight. Hard by the window ran the garden fence overgrown with flowers and leafy vine. The leafage still trembled as if a light hand or breath of wind had brushed over it. Long he stared at the leaves, but he was loath to venture into the garden. Instead, he leaned against the fence, raised his eyes, and pressing his finger to his lips, enjoined himself to silence, lest by a hasty utterance he should break his train of thought. Several times he tapped his forehead, as if stirring memories that had long lain dormant there. At last, gnawing at his fingers, he drew blood. "Serve a man right, serve a man right," he cried at the top of his compass. The courtyard, alive with, I'm just wondering whether, are we okay? Okay, good, then I plow on. Serve a man right. The courtyard, alive with shouts just moments earlier, stood hushed and deserted like a cemetery. The entire hunting party had ridden out. Hollowing his hands, Tadeusz raised them like trumpets to his ears and listened intently. Presently, the sound of bugles and hunters' cries in the forest came floating on the wind toward him. Finding his saddled horse waiting for him in the stable, he seized his gun, vaulted astride, and sped off like a madman toward the 2 taverns by the chapel where the hunt had agreed to meet at dawn. The 2 inns, leaning inward from either side of the highway, peered menacingly into each other's windows like mortal enemies. The older one belonged to the castle owner by right of deed. The new one to Judge Soplica, who built it as an act of spite against the castle. Gervais lorded it over the one as over his own inheritance. Proteus held the post of honor in the other. Now, what happens is a beautiful, powerful, realistic description of the Jewish inn, which I would dearly love to read, but I would like to go on since there's some action coming, and this will slow us down, but it's worth reading. It's a masterpiece of description. This Mickiewicz achieves in verse, this description, but it's a naturalistic description. It could be in a realist novel, and it's all in verse, rhymed verse. It's a masterpiece. And it also, yes, gives you a good insight into Poland, pre-war, Poland, long before the Second World War, when we had a large Jewish population living together with the native Poles. But I will just, I'll just go to the tavern. The interior of his tavern, his name is Yankel. Incidentally, Nikolai Gogol, the Russian or Ukrainian writer, author of the, rats.
Dead Souls.
Not Dead Souls. No, the one about the Cossack. Anyone out there can help me? You know, I have no trouble with adjectives and adverbs, but for some reason nouns in my advanced age just fly out of my head, and I can't think why. Why should a noun be harder than an adjective or a preposition or something? Anyway, the interior of the tavern was divided into two equal halves, like a Jewish schoolhouse. One part consisted of a number of narrow rectangular rooms reserved for gentlemen travelers and their ladies. The other housed an ample hall. Narrow, many-legged wooden tables ran the length of its walls, and alongside each table ran short-limbed benches resembling their sires, the tables, in every respect, only smaller. Ranged even now on these encircling benches sat men and women of the village and members of the minor nobility, the Schlachta. Shoulder to shoulder they sat. Only the bailiff sat by himself. After morning mass at the chapel, the day being Sunday, they dropped in at Yankel's for a tipple and a spot of good cheer. A tumbler of home brew liquor stood frothing before each guest. Above them hovered the barmaid, bottle in hand, and in the center of the hall stood the innkeeper, Yankel, in a black floor-length coat fastened with silver clasps. With one hand tucked under his satin sash, the other solemnly stroking his grey beard, he cast his gaze about, issuing orders here, greeting new arrivals there, striking up conversations with the seated, settling quarrels, but serving no one, he being merely the proprietor making the rounds. Yankel was an old Jew, respected everywhere for his probity. In all the years he'd kept the inn, no rustic or nobleman ever lodged a complaint at the manor. Nor was there cause, for his drinks were always neat and choice. He kept a strict account and cheated no one. Boisterous spirits he tolerated, but he drew the line at drunken behavior. Fond of parties, he threw open his house for every wedding and christening, and on Sundays he invited over the village band with their array of musical instruments, including a bull fiddle and a doodle sack. Yankel knew music. Indeed, he was famous for his musicianship. Now and then he made tours of the country houses with the cymbalin, the instrument of his people, or also known as the hammer dulcimer. the cymbalant, the instrument of his people, amazing all with his playing and songs, which he delivered in a voice that was trained and true. Though a Jew, he spoke Polish with a clean accent. He had a special fondness for Polish folk songs. Of these, after each excursion across the Niemen, he brought back a good many, mazurkas from the Warsaw, kolomikas from Galicia. Rumor had it, of uncertain reliability to be sure, that he was the first to bring home and popularize the song now famous around the world. Remember, this was 1835 when Mickiewicz was writing this, and there were so many Poles in emigration after the defeat of the uprising against the Russians in 1833. So Poland, Paris was full of Poles, and their music became well known, among other things. So around the world, the one our legions' bugles first pealed forth to the Lombard on the Ausonian fields. The art of singing pays handsomely in Lithuania. It wins people's affection, makes one famous and rich. Jankel made a fortune. In time, having had his fill of fame and profit, he hung up his 9-string dulcimer, and settling into the inn with his children, turned to ply his trade as a spirits vendor. He also served as an under-rabbi in the neighboring town. Wherever he went, he was received as a welcome guest and trusted advisor, for he knew the trading worries and the grain business, indispensable items of knowledge in the country. In short, people esteemed Jankel as an honorable Pole. It was Jankel who put an end to the bloody brawls that often broke out between the two taverns. He leased the pair of them. Respected alike by the old Horeshko partisans and the judge's serving men, he alone knew how to hold the grim warden and fractious court usher in check, Protes and Gervais. In Jankel's presence, both men bridled their grudges. Gervais curbed his formidable arm, Protes his formidable tongue. Today, Gervais was absent, having left with the hunting party, loath to let the raw young count venture alone on so perilous an expedition. He'd set out with him for counsel as well as protection. Yeah? Oh. But I'm just hoping I get to the. Well, it's all very good, but. Okay, so the Bernardine, the monk, he's a very important character in Tadeusz. Mysterious character. And he's popping in on the local area with all kinds of messages and secret messages coming, bearing news. This Napoleon, his grand army was advancing towards Poland at that time, and so he was always full of. Actually, he'd come into Poland already. This was around the time of the treaty, the Battle of Jena. Yeah, Jena, and followed by the Treaty of 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠𝑧. So Napoleon was already across the Niemen, the river that divides Lithuania from Poland. So here is, he's a fascinating character, Byronic, but very Byronic too. It was, okay, so the Bernardine sat in Gervais's seat between two benches in the corner, farthest from the door where those of the Orthodox faith hang their holy icons. Jankel himself had seated him there. So the Bernardine is the monk. The Franciscan monks are... Franciscan? Yeah, are Franciscans called Bernardines in Poland, after St. Bernard of Siena, I think. The Jew, okay, so Jankel had seated the monk, had seated him in the corner. The Jew evidently held him in the highest regard, for whenever he saw the monk's meat pot run low, he had it promptly replenished. By all accounts, they befriended each other in their youth while traveling abroad. Robak is the name of Father Robak, or Robak is the name of the monk. And Robak in Polish means worm. So he chose this name as an act of humility. And there was a good reason. Robak, I'm going to say, often visited the tavern under the cover of night to confer with the Jew on various important matters. Word went around that the monk trafficked in contraband, but this malicious rumor warranted no credence. Robak sat hunched over the table, holding forth in a low voice. Our squirearchy crowded attentively about him, noses bent over his snuff box. Helping themselves to a pinch, they fired off a salvo of sneezes, loud as mortar shots. "Reverendissime!" snorted Skoluba. "Now there's snuff that goes straight to your head. In all the days I've lugged this hooter of mine," yes, here he stroked his long nose, "I've never sniffed the like." He sneezed again. "Genuine Bernardine, from Kovna, no doubt, a city famous for her snuff and mead. I was there once. When was it now?" "Good health," broke in Robak. "Good health to all of you, gentlemen. As to the snuff, it hails from a good deal farther than Mr. Skoluba supposes. Jasna Góra, our holy hill. Aye, the Pauline fathers grind this snuff in Częstochowa, home of the wonder-working image of the Blessed Virgin, Częstochowa, Queen of the Polish realm. Even now she goes by her other title of Grand Duchess of Lithuania. Even now she holds the royal office, and yet schism reigns over the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Częstochowa, you say, struck up Wilbik. I made my confession there once when I went on pilgrimage 30 years ago. Is it true the French abide there now and mean to tear down the church and seize the treasury? Because it's all written up here in the Lithuanian Courier. Not true, countered the Bernardine. His Imperial Highness Napoleon is an exemplary son of the church. The Pope himself anointed him. They see eye to eye, and together they revive the faith of France, which admittedly has seen better days. Aye, Częstochowa pours ample silver into the national coffers for the good of the fatherland, for Poland. God himself enjoins it. His altar tables have always fed the nation's coffers. 100,000 patriots, perhaps soon even more, stand under arms in the Duchy of Warsaw. Who's to pay for it? Is it not up to you, Lithuanian Poles? Why, it's coppers you drop into Moscow's chest. Devil take it, cried Wilbik. They seize it by force. Reverend Father, piped up a meek little rustic, bobbing and scratching his head. The nobility suffer, aye, but not half as bad as us. Why, they fleece us to the bone. Bumpkin, yelled Skoluba. Fool. It's easier for you yokels. You're used to being skinned like eels, but we born and bred gentlefolk are accustomed to our golden liberty. Aye, my brothers, in the old days, the gentleman on his grange. Yes, yes, we know, they cried out one and all. The gentleman on his grange stands equal to the governor. Aye, Skoluba resumed. But now they question our pedigree and send us rummaging for our letters patent. Oh, spare me, yelled Uracha. Your sires are but ennobled peasants, whereas I spring from princes. To ask me for my letters, why, God only knows when I got my title. Let the Muscovite ask the oak, who gave him the patent to stand taller than the shrubs. Beguile others with your tales, O prince, said Żagiel. You'll find more than one house here with a coronet. You have a cross on your coat of arms, cried Podhajski, an allusion to a converted Jew gracing your line. Lies, broke in Birbash. I spring from Crimean counts, yet I have crosses over the galley charging my shield. A rose argent with a coronet done on a field of ore, field d'or, field of gold, shouted Mickiewicz. He writes himself into his story. Now there's a princely blazon. You've only to consult Strykovsky. His armorial makes frequent mention of it. A great murmur broke out in the inn. Robak fled to his snuff box and offered them each a pinch. At once the noise subsided and they politely inhaled a few grains and fired off another salvo. Profiting from the pause, the Bernardine resumed, "Great men have sneezed on taking this snuff. Would you believe it if I told you Dombrowski took 4 snorts from this box?" "Not the Dombrowski," they said. "The very one, the general. I was in his camp the day he took Gdańsk from the Germans. He had a letter to write. Afraid of nodding off, he took a snort, sneezed, and clapped me twice on the shoulder. 'Father Robak,' he said, 'if all goes well, we shall meet in Lithuania before the year is out. But be sure her sons greet me with snuff, this Częstochowa snuff. Mind, I'll take no other.'" Robak's words aroused so much wonder, such transports of joy in the boisterous throng, that for a moment they fell silent. Soon, half-audible whispers made themselves heard. "Snuff? From Poland? Częstochowa? General Dombrowski? From Italy?" And all at once, as if thought had fused with thought and word with word, the entire assembly cried out in unison, "Dombrowski!" And joined in that single roar, they fell into a common clasp. Rustic embraced Crimean Count, Coronet embraced the cross, Roses argent, galley and griffin. All cares went by the board, even the Bernardine sat forgotten. They sang out the Dombrowski mazurka, all the while shouting, "Vodka, mead, wine." Father Robak suffered them to sing on, but at last it was time to intervene. Seizing the snuff box in both hands, he broke up their singing with a sneeze. Before they could start up again, he hastened to speak. "You find my snuff praiseworthy. Is it not so, esteemed gentlemen? But take a closer look at the box and see what's depicted there." And wiping the soiled base of the box with his handkerchief, remember, this is all in rhymed metric. It humbles one. Anyway, and wiping the soiled base of the box with his handkerchief, he revealed to their gaze a miniature portraying a tiny swarm-like army. In its midst stood a mounted rider, big as a beetle, clearly the commander of the host. With one hand on the rein, the other raised to his nose, he was rearing his horse as though urging it into the heavens. "Now," said Robak, "look well on this awesome figure. Guess who?" Intrigued to no end, they examined it closely. "He's a great man," added Robak, "an emperor, but not Russia's. Tsars never snort snuff." "A great man wearing a grey capote?" said Tsidik. "I thought all great men went about in gold. Even the lowest ranking general among the Muscovites drips with gold like a saffron-dusted pike." "Not true," chimed in Rimsha. "As a lad once I saw Kościuszko, our commander-in-chief. Now there was a man. He went about in the peasant's kaftan, a chamara, that is." "Chamara, my eyes," snorted Wilbik. "You mean a taratatka?" "A chamara has braids," countered Mickiewicz. "A taratatka is smooth all over." Contention broke out over the various cuts of frock and coat. Seeing the talk go astray, the artful Robak brought it back to a focus, to his snuff box. Again he proffered it. They sneezed and drank each other's health. The monk resumed. "When Emperor Napoleon in an engagement sniffs pinch after pinch of snuff, it is a sure sign he's winning. Take Austerlitz, for example. The French stand beside their guns, like so. A host of Muscovites bears down on them, and the emperor watches in silence. Each French salvo cuts a wide swath through the Muscovite regiments. Regiment after regiment comes charging up and tumble from the saddle. And whenever a regiment falls, the emperor takes a snort. Finally, Tsar Alexander, his brother Constantine, and the German Prince Franz flee the field, and Bonaparte, seeing the battle won, breaks out into a laugh, dusts the snuff from his fingers. So keep in mind, should any of you gentlemen present here come to serve in the Emperor's army. Ah, dear father, cried Skuluba, when will that be? The year drags on from feast day to feast day, and each time they announce the arrival of the French. We strain our eyes, we stare and stare until we blink, and still the Muscovite has gripped us by the neck. But by the time it dawns, the dewfall will have dimmed our eyes. Come, sir, rejoined the monk, grousing's for grannies. It's the Jewish thing to stand idle till a traveller comes knocking at the tavern door. With Napoleon on our side, it's no trick to beat the Muscovite. 3 times he's tanned the Swabian's hide. Has he not drubbed the dreaded Prussian, flung the English back across the sea? The Muscovite will get his due, never you mind. But what'll come of it, sir, if our nobility take to horse and sword, and then when there's no one left to fight? Who are you? Having done it all himself, Napoleon's sure to say, who are you? I shall manage without you. It's not enough to stand waiting for a guest or even to invite him in. A good host summons his servants and sets the tables. Before the feast, he must clean the house of dirt. Clean the house, I repeat, clean the house, my sons. There fell a moment of silence. Soon voices in the crowd piped up. Clean house? Well, how? What does father mean by that? We'll do all you say, where we stand ready for anything. Only please, father, do make your meaning clear. But the priest suddenly waved silence. Something outside had arrested his attention. He drew his head back from the window and rose to his feet. No time now, he said. We shall have occasion to discuss this at greater length later. Tomorrow I have errands to run in the district town. On my way back, I'll be looking in on you sons for arms. I'm nearly finished. Then be sure to spend the night with us in Yechrimov, called out the bailiff. The ensign will be glad to see you. Why, it's an old maxim in Lithuania, happy an arms collector in Yechrimov. And look in on us, if you would, said Zhubkovsky. Father can rely on us for a bolt of linen, a tub of butter, a fatted calf or sheep. Remember these words in Zubkova, the almsman lacks for nothing. And don't forget us, cried Skoluba. Nor us, yelled Terayevich. No alms quester ever left Pucevicha feeling peckish. You have to see the spelling. But it's a play on my translation. It has a play on the p and the t and the k. And anyway, small point. Such were the entreaties and pledges with which the nobility plied the monk. But by now he was well out the tavern door. It was a pale, sullen-faced Tadeusz he had just seen burning up the high road past the window. The sight of the lad hunched low in the saddle, bareheaded, belaboring his horse with crop and spur, caused him great consternation. Striking a brisk pace, the monk set out after the youth. The road took him in the direction of the great forest, which brooded low on the horizon, as far as the eye could see. And that's when the hunt starts, but I think I've read enough. Thank you. Thank you. So if there are any questions, I'm willing to entertain them. Yes, John.
When did your love for Tadeusz begin?
Actually, I remember I must have been about 8 or 9. My dad was bathing me and my brothers.
Can you speak into the
Microphone?
Oh, yes. My father used to know reams of the poem, and he used to recite them to us sometimes when we were in the bathtub with my brothers. the family history has a lot to do with it. And then my choice of study was Slavic studies, Slavonic studies, so I took Russian and Polish literature. And it was in Warsaw. I was in Warsaw on a grant, and I was able to study at the Institute of Literary Research. It's next to the big monument of Nicholas Copernicus in Warsaw by the university, and it was there that that was 1976. That's when I first seriously thought of translating Tadeusz. And then but I was I was too busy, never had time, really. Had to raise 5 children and homeschool them with my wife, and so I had to have 3 jobs, full-time jobs for a while, including teaching at the academy. And but when I retired, just before retiring, I quickly wanted to bequeath to Keith something for the academy, because I was very happy at the academy. I very much enjoyed teaching there. And but in my rush, because I was retiring soon, I produced this popular version, and it was published just before I retired. And but it wasn't quite what I wanted. It wasn't quite. I had higher hopes for it. So after retiring, I had the leisure to produce the new one. But this is still very good, and for those who are interested, it's here. These are here. They're available for sale for a donation. Okay, the hardcovers, and then we have the new ones here too. Unfortunately, the recent publisher didn't make it. He was supposed to send a batch of books to us, but I have a few of my own, and I'm making them available for sale. But I'll need 2 students. I think Gabby is Gabriella there?
They will be there.
Yeah. If they could man the table at some point soon and take care of that.
I was wondering if you could tell us, is the hunt the main action of the poem, or is there another major plot that is the focus of the poem? It's all part of the building up this life, the culture, the life and the pastimes and sports of the Polish szlachta, of the Polish minor nobility of the time. So that's a vital part of it. But yes, the plot involves much more. It involves a conspiracy. I don't want to, give you any spoilers, but there's a secret identity that has to be revealed, and there's an uprising among all the Poles ever since the Kosciuszko uprising. Every single generation since then to the Solidarity crisis, every generation there was an uprising, but against Germans, against Prussia, against the Russians, and so the insurrectionist spirit has always been strong. And the interesting that Poles also have been very unruly. And I was hoping to get to this part in the hunt, where they go. The poor steward tries to keep order. The Poles are so passionate, the nobility, and they dash off into chaos. And I'm just reminded of coming from Britain
raised in the 50s where the Battle of Britain was still very much talked about, and the typical unruly Polish aviators who they were called the Mad Poles or the Mad Foreigners, who would break from their English squadron leader or wing commander and take the matter into their own hands and dive in and create chaos. Anyway, so there is that insurrectionist spirit there, and that is an important part of the novel. It is essentially, in many ways, a novel, as I say. It's a story. It's a deeply engrossing story. And funny, too. Funny, you can laugh in places.
Chris?
Yes?
A beautiful talk, a brilliant poem. I read the earlier translation, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to the new version as well. And I think certainly that the humour that you mentioned really suffuses the work, and I found it very, very enjoyable book. One aspect to it surprises me, and I'd like to see if I'm right, and it's also to maybe hear your comments on it. I think when we think of, as an outsider, I think of, so to be truly Polish means to be deeply Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Polish national epic,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the faith is absent. Is that fair? The people in the church are there, but is that just a sort of a superficial impression? Could you comment on that?
Yeah.
And if there's something to it, what is the author's intention here by the way he presents the faith?
Yes. Well, of course, being a traditional Catholic country, Poland had the culture. It's among other things, the Catholic culture impregnates, right, the mores, the habits, of the Poles in a superficial way too. I mean, my father used to describe it after going to Mass in Trembowla, in the city where he was born. Right after Mass, he'd head over to the Jewish tavern and with his father, have a little noggin. That was, I mean, my father, frankly, was, well, there were certainly what we would here call Catholic, well, the cultural Catholics, I guess we'd have to call them. But look at the presence. You don't forget the invocation at the beginning of the whole story. Is Our Lady was the Queen of Poland. So Mickiewicz himself had a sort of a complex relationship with his faith. There was a period in his life when he fell for this for this Towiański, a kind of mystic wacko, if you want to call him. He fell for him, but not for a long time. There's also Miłosz, the Polish poet who wrote a history of the Polish literature. Miłosz tells the story of how Mickiewicz had a chat, what do you call that, with the Pope, had a conversation with the Pope, and at one point he got so excited. It was over the uprising, 1830 uprising in Poland, eastern Poland, and he, according to Miłosz, but I don't take Miłosz too seriously. According to him, he grabbed the Pope by the scruff of his neck, by his shirt. Look at. Well, I don't want to break it, avoid spoilers, but when Father Robach finally, well, what does he achieve? He achieves in the end. He sacrifices his life for another, and he's full of. He waits for the sacraments. He waits for the priest to bring the viaticum for him. So I wouldn't say it's completely. He presents a pretty realistic cross-section of the Polish community. Of course, the tarot cards, yes. Telimena and her, right, they show the tarot card. But that was part of the culture. Any other questions?
Earlier you were saying that there was, you were comparing, or saying that Tadeusz was hard to compare with other literature. So kind of the description of it seems like an epic. The song rolls to me, but then reading about the excitement of the Heights, I brought to mind Tolstoy's The Cossacks. Because like the description of the rugged terrain and the adventure. But how would you compare Tadeusz to any other kind of work of literature?
Any other work of Slavic literature, you mean?
That's what I mean, like cafe.
Well, yes. To my chin. Oh. By the way, Taras Bulba was the novel by Nikolai Gogol that I had in mind a little while ago, which describes Cossack lives of the Cossacks and the relationship between the Poles and the Ukrainians and the Cossacks. Yes, well, it is very much. Mickiewicz was a Latinist. In fact, he never studied Latin beyond high school, but he was quite brilliant. And later on, when he was in exile, he had no way of supporting himself. He supported himself by teaching Latin and did it very. So there are all kinds of motifs taken from the Aeneid. The whole structure of Tadeusz, 12 books, right? So he was very much aware of the epic tradition. And of course, the Homeric similes, these long, it was all, yeah, he was, but it was quite a unique, like there's a whole commentary on to what extent he followed the tradition, because it wasn't just the epic. As I mentioned right at the beginning, he was a stylist. He took styles. There were parodies and various just borrowings from other literary genres that he would throw into it. It's a fascinating question, the genres, literary genre of Tadeusz. What kind of genre is it? And it's, as I say, it's a mixed bag.
Okay, well, Mr. Zakrzewski, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Don't go away, we have something for you. The college will have a gift for you shortly, but at the moment we have our representative from the Polish Heritage Society who will bring a gift up for you. Okay.
Special frame for your book because it's book and congratulations.
Lovely.
Alex, zit je goed in zin?
So this work, this translation is obviously a labor of love. You've been translating 𝑇𝑎𝑑𝑒𝑢𝑠 as long as I've known you, which is about 22 years and beyond that. So we can see the love in the craftsmanship that comes out in that translation. It's really fine. I don't know Polish, but I can tell the quality of the English language is really remarkable. So we're honored to have been given this insight into it. I'm sure many people will want to buy a copy of the book and savor it for themselves. And speaking of savoring, we also do have refreshments afterwards, so I hope you all will partake of those. And once again, thank you, Mr. Zakrzewski. Thank you, that's beautiful.
Have you had a chance to talk with them?
No, I
If you
haven't.
get a chance,
Turn this on. There we go.
you might want to broach the subject of what kind of from the Polish
Which one are you talking about? The one from the embassy or the Heritage Society? Okay.
See what, the idea of maybe in the future having